Welcome back to the bridge. It's been a 2 week hiatus. Me and my co-host Zach have both been adapting to a little bit of a change of schedule. I'm now back part of the workforce, and as such, my schedule is a little more restrictive. And Zach, you're back in your language school. I think you believe you were saying.
Yes, I'm back in my language school, and there's also all kinds of bullshit happening here in Germany. You're not even allowed to go outside in certain cities after 10 o'clock now.
Ooh, ouch, 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 ouch.
Yeah, between 10 o'clock at night and 5 in the morning.
Okay,
Yeah, there's a curfew.
that sucks. I like.
Because, the coronavirus only exists at night.
Right, like what is yeah, what's the point there? Is it just
The
even if there's
situation is, listen,
traffic?
the situation is like this, and we won't get political on the podcast or anything like this, but the virus is spreading in the workplace and at the schools, and I understand you can't have children out of school, and it's a huge issue, and obviously like the economy needs to continue functioning, but yeah, saying to people you can't go out after 10 o'clock is not going to change anything. It's just a draconian law that is going to make people's mental health worse than it already is.
Right, right. And like in my thought pattern, it's like if you're out at night, there's less people out at night, and like you know, if you're out during the night, you're probably just going for a walk or something. Like I imagine bars aren't open or anything.
No, like yeah, like all public places are closed, and even if you want to go buy a pair of pants,
Right.
you have to go get a coronavirus test. They have it set up so you can get a Schnell test, a quick test,
Uh huh.
and it'll give you the result on the spot. But you have to, book an appointment online, and you have to show up at a certain time and provide your insurance information, and it's a whole bureaucratic bullshit.
Okay.
And just so you can go buy pants.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I didn't
And so
realize it was such like
you're
that.
walking around the city, and from the coronavirus broke out a year ago, and everyone looks progressively just sort of worse. Like people, I haven't got a haircut in almost a year.
Ooh.
Um, People are wearing poor, they're just wearing old clothes because it's such a hassle to go buy new clothes. This sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I was just saying, it's like even at night though, I'd imagine everyone would generally be distanced from each other. It's like how you're not going anywhere particularly. You're just outside, really. I'd imagine.
well, I mean, it's better to be outside really than inside. You're in the open air.
Exactly.
It's harder for the virus to travel between people, but they want to. It's a strategy to reduce social contacts.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's the idea. But
Uh, but yeah, I just that's why we missed an episode there. Just readjusting and trying to figure out a better schedule, a better time for us to get together and record. But hopefully we'll be back on track now, and it won't happen again. But
into a more regular flow.
right now that we've kind of gotten into the beat of our new schedules now.
And let's be honest, the beginning of April, there wasn't a lot of super compelling releases. Anyways, we didn't miss out on much.
No, no, we might end up doing it depends depending on our free time. Another omnibus episode to catch up on a few episodes. I know we didn't talk about Lana Del Rey. There was an Igloo Ghost record that I was interested in visiting. There was the album that we were supposed to talk about from the Spirit of the Beehive, which could absolutely find some time there to get talked about. But we'll see if we can find the time to fit that into our schedule and put that in as well.
Yeah, I mean, an omnibus episode will be coming down the line at some time when we don't know, but there's certainly albums to be talked about.
Right, right. This week, however, we are going with a very popular band, the well-known, enigmatic. Those two words are paradoxical. Anyway, Brockhampton. Now,
Well, it's funny you say they're well known because I'm an idiot when it comes to rap music and pop music.
hmm
I shouldn't say an idiot, but a dilettante.
hmm
And I was not really. I have heard of Brockhampton in very far away whisperings, but I was completely unfamiliar with the band up until recently.
Okay, sure. So you had to listen to this album. Had you heard a Brockhampton song before?
I had not heard a song. I had heard the band's name. I knew they existed, but if I did hear one of their songs, I didn't know it was a Brockhampton song.
So let me get you up to speed a little bit with Brockhampton. They really kind of hit the scene a few years ago with their Saturation releases. They released 3 albums in a year: Saturation 1, 2, and 3.
Well, I mean, just to interject for a second, in the past 5 years, these guys have released like 5 or 6 fucking full-length LPs.
Absolutely, and absolutely. And I guess I'll talk about it now, as I didn't listen to the last 2 things they released, Ginger and their Technical Difficulties release, because I was fatigued on these guys. Honestly, I felt that they had just released so much music in a short period of time, most specifically the Saturation releases, where they had 3 albums in 1 year, and then Iridescence not long after, the next year. I had heard enough Brockhampton to just put them away for a while. So I skipped the albums that came after Iridescence, and this is my first return to them as a collective, because again I was just fatigued on their sound. They just released so much music that I digested that I was ready to put them to the side for a while. And I had a similar issue with King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard when they released their 4 albums in a year, which I listened to. It was like by the end of the year, I'm so fatigued on the band, I still haven't gone back and listened to a King Gizzard album since then, even though I enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always skeptical of artists in any medium that release full-blown projects one after another after another after another. It's one thing to be prolific, but when you're releasing full realized pieces of work so close to one another, I sort of begin to question whether or not I begin to question the quality.
Yeah,
that's when I approach the work. I'm just a little bit skeptical. Is this in need of some heavy editing? I mean, you've had such a wild and intense, period of creation. You've created so much. Is it really all quality? Does it really all stand up next to each other?
And in the case of, I understand what you mean, and I think in the case of King Gizzard, there was definitely a few lulls in their album release of that year. I think the reason why I think Brockhampton was kind of celebrated because all 3 Saturation albums were really well done. Okay. There's probably, I can't say there's not skippable tracks among the 3 albums. That's just too hard of a statement to make. But as a general whole, the Saturation collective trio was super well received and really blew them up into the mainstream as a self-proclaimed boy band.
Yeah, I see on Spotify their bio just reads best boy band in the world or something to that effect.
Right, which I think is a cute thing
to
do.
I said, well, that's very informative.
Yeah.
It left an impression anyways.
Right, and they actually also met, I don't know if you read this, they had met on a Kanye West fan forum.
Okay, no, I don't know anything about the origins of the band or anything.
Yeah, they met on a forum, and they all came a collective from there, which I also think is pretty cute. It kind of makes sense that these guys would be Kanye West fans when you kind of hear their emphasis on production and stuff. They're also a very diverse group. There's a bunch of them. Black,
there's 6
white.
guys, right?
There's more than that because they include their producers and stuff as part of the band.
Okay. Yeah,
in terms of main vocalists, there's I think only 4 of them do the vocal work. Kevin Abstract, Matt Champion, Don McLennan, Merlin. I know Joba has some big placements here, and I think some of the other ones will also come in occasionally and do some vocal work as well. But they also
Well,
include like Bareface and Jabari Manwa as producers. And I can pronounce that, Rommel and Kiko. Like, there's so many of them, and that's why I sent you that little that meme when we were listening to the album. It was like an interview, like a Zoom call, and it was like interview with Brockhampton, and it's like this huge screen of like 40 pictures of Brockhampton, obviously fake, but
yeah, it looks like yeah, it looks like a company meeting, for God's sakes. It's
right.
the
So
board of directors were meeting. You know, the
right.
board of directors of Brockhampton.
So
But
there's a lot of
just to
members.
comment on what, yeah, when you look at their bio on Spotify, they have a couple pictures up, and it's of the same six dudes.
Right, right. I think
But what you're saying, which I guess are like the key members, but they sound like the type of band who try to forward a community
they are.
vibe as far as the group goes. They're
Abs-
a true collective in that sense.
right, right. Absolutely. Another main thing that is a huge story point for this band is Amir Van, which was one of the main rappers and voices on Brockhampton releases, for the Saturation releases, got in trouble for abuse allegations and left the band after the Saturation releases.
Oh,
And
okay.
so Iridescence and Ginger were very somber releases and kind of like tackling with this. And in my opinion, Amir Van, it was probably the best member, if not next to Kevin Abstract, Amir Van. They were kind of like the figureheads, in my perspective.
Uh-huh.
You know, yeah, people might disagree with me there. And so losing Amir was actually a big hit for the sound of the band. And so they've kind of been
Okay.
kind of like wrestling a little bit with that. I think in their last few albums, but this album, I feel like I think they kind of show that they are a new kind of piece. You know, they've kind of come along and come to terms with everything that happened there, and that
Well,
kind of hiccup.
if you look at the album cover for Ginger, like I'm doing now, it's two guys giving each other a hug, which sort of summarizes or describes or imagines what it is you were just describing, like people trying to get over something or coming to grips with something, or some sort of forgiveness, or going through some sort of trauma. But this record does not sound like a transitional record at all. It sounds like a very, for the most part, realized
Right.
project.
And to kind of clarify the kind of importance of Amir in the band's history, like you can see him on two of their album covers in Saturation 3 and 2. And maybe
Okay.
one, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell who that is. So, like, he was a major part of the band, and so losing
Could
him.
be Dave Bautista from Guardian of the Galaxies.
So it's hard to tell uh, quite what the difference was going to be. It was mostly still whole, but you could tell that there was like a little dip in quality because he was one of the better lyricists, I believe. But Kevin Abstract, in my opinion, is the best member or the most prominent member of the band, and how he kind of like it features on a lot of the tracks and really kind of pulls things together and seems to be one of the better lyricists. Not to take away from some of the other ones like Matt Champion and Dom, who come in and deliver hail marys in some of their verses, and who really like stepped up to the plate, I think, and to fill that kind of a little bit of a void. And even Joba here, who I think is the MVP of this album specifically, um, has really kind of stepped up and kind of carry more on his back than I think maybe in some previous releases. And I think that kind of creates a more whole album.
Okay, so you're obviously a pretty intense, even though you haven't listened to the last two records, intense Brockhampton fan. You know all the guys and their talents and their weaknesses.
Uh,
As
I'm fair. Like again, I did listen to those three Saturation releases, and I kind of read up and was familiar with them during that period. And then I took the break after the Mir incident. I listened to Iridescence, which was their first without Amir. I didn't really like Iridescence all that much. Like there was a few things on there I really enjoyed, but I enjoy Brockhampton when it's more in its hype pocket, and just kind of like that pop rap section where there's energy and like engine rattling hip hop type stuff that you put in the car and go on a road trip, and let the bass hit you. Like that was kind of the more style of Brockhampton I was appealed to, and some of the more sentimental stuff. And then when they reach into the more R&B pocket or some of the more vocal heavy pockets, I thought they were a little weak there. I didn't think they wrote as good songs than the other ones. Sometimes on Iridescence specifically.
Yeah.
In Saturation, there was a better mix, and even on this album, I think there's a better mix of those two styles.
It's curious that you say that, though, because I really like it when the band goes into the more sentimental and R&B pocket.
Right, and honestly, on this album,
the band is curious because they're like this band that they obviously are playing with two different genres, with rap, and then I guess we'll just call it pop.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bridging these two genres together, which is what distinguishes them as a band, in my opinion.
Right.
And so it's always a gentle balancing act on every track, to try to get it right.
Yeah.
And then I found, especially with this first leg of the album, except for Count on Me, the first 4 tracks, it really goes deep into the more rap-orientated tracks, and I would say more conventional rap-orientated tracks. And I don't necessarily think it's a fault of the band so much as it is of the heavy features.
Okay. Well, let's begin with the beginning of the album.
Okay, I want to comment one thing on what you were saying about the lyrics.
Sure.
Because the features aside, on the tracks that feature just the members of the group, I like the verses. However, I find the more pop-orientated sections that are usually reserved to like the chorus or the refrain, the lyrics usually always take a dive during those sections, and I'm not sure which member is responsible for those sections, but just sort of being ignorant for newcomer to the band, I noticed or felt that whoever was responsible for those sections was not as strong as the other members.
Sure. I actually don't know if that's like limited to a single member. I would think it's more of a collaborative thing, but usually it's Kevin Abstract who will voice pitch or something, and he will be the one who delivers the choruses.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have an issue with the content of the chorus or the delivery of the chorus.
Well, both, because there's also a problem oftentimes with the choruses. They use way too much auto-tune, which is unnecessary because the guy's got a good voice, and I would rather just listen to his voice rather than have it auto-tuned to fucking hell.
All right, and I actually wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think that's an issue that they've done on all their releases. That I've always had an issue with is their overabundance of auto-tune usage in certain areas. But there are times on this album, and to your point, where they don't, and the chorus will come in very, very clearly and very well sung. Some of the later tracks, I believe, more specifically.
Yeah, and then when they bring in the autotune, I'm like, no, what are you doing? It was, you had the sound, like you're ruining it.
Right. There was one song I actually mentioned to you I wanted to talk about because I thought it was such an egregious example of that same point. Let me just double check which one it was. I believe it was "I'll Take on You." Was one of those ones that I thought it was one of the more egregious auto-tune parts. There's also some other scenarios where they do it.
Yes, yeah. I think it occurs on Bankroll as well, but I'll take you on.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I'll take you on. That is the most egregious auto-tune track on the whole album, and I think it opens with this heavy auto-tune, and oh man, but I think again it's and these guys are pretty young. Obviously, they're talented artists, but they have this sound, but at the same time, it almost seems like the conventions of the genres that they're working in holds them back sometimes, at least on this record.
In what way do you mean? Like,
Well, I mean, okay, let's start actually getting into the record because it's goes to my point. The first four tracks, except for "Count on Me," which is track number 4, have really famous features. Danny Brown's features on the first track, JPEG Mafia on number 2, and ASAP Rocky and ASAP Ferg on number 4. And I found those tracks are the ones that are steeped the most in what I would consider to be conventions of sort of like of pure rap. Like the themes of the lyrics are very much about, like earning money, being exceptional because you have earned cash. They're dropping the N bomb a lot. Um, there's a lot of pop cultural references, especially in the JPEG Mafia feature, which, in my opinion, is the worst verse on the entire record because it's just there are a couple good lines, but he essentially just goes from one pop culture reference to another. Not that there's anything wrong with using pop culture for inspiration, but sometimes it seems like it can be just sort of like a pool of topics that artists can pull from to serve as a crutch to cover up the fact that they don't really have that much to say.
right? I think,
But
I'm.
just to conclude my point, after you get past Bankroll and you get to The Light, the album almost changes completely. Like a lot of the sort of more pure rap orientated tracks almost disappear and it begins to walk this trapeze rope of this pop rap fusion that they've put together. And the album, I mean, if they cut the first 4 songs, I think the record would be way better.
Um, I don't know if I disagree with you particularly. Um, I enjoy Buzzcut, uh,
Mm,
and I also enjoy Chain On. Uh,
okay. Of those first 4 tracks, Buzzcut's the best.
uh, I didn't particularly care for the third and fourth track. Um,
Yeah, and "Count on Me" is sort of a little bit like "Dear Lord." Like that track is it's like poppy and gospely.
yeah, but Dear Lord, in my opinion, has a more of a function to it. You
It
know,
does, yeah, it does,
uh,
yeah.
and where Count on Me just feels a little weird. I don't like the kind of sentiment it had either. It's like you don't even have to buy anything, I'll get it for you, kind of thing. And they're kind of
Yeah,
crooning on. The song was just kind of forgettable. I thought of the
it was cheap.
first 4, Count on Me was the worst one in my opinion.
Okay, yeah.
Bankroll was fine, but um,
It
just
was
fine.
just it was average, yeah, just
Right,
painfully average.
right. But let me talk a little bit about Buzzcut, which I think is their initial single from the album. I
Okay.
love Danny Brown.
Uh-huh.
You're not going to convince me otherwise. I love some of his lines here where he's dropping references to incels and alphas and normies, and people are going to dox your. He's going to dox your house with Crips and stuff like that. And it's just like he's such a weirdo. I can't help but appreciate him. And I think his verse is really well done. He's one of the obviously the most talented people on the album. I think Kevin Abstract is good here. I even like the bridge is pretty good. Get on my ride, but it's like it is a rap song and there's a lot of energy and it's definitely one of those songs you're gonna turn on in your car and probably step a little too hard on the gas than you should. There's a lot like pump up to it. I think it was a great start, but it was a bit of a red herring because while I think it is one of those more traditional rap songs, it's still very interesting and compelling instrumentally in the production. Um, but it doesn't quite really emphasize or encompass this album. Uh,
It's not representative of the sound. I don't find any of the first 4 tracks are, and that's my one of my main problems with them.
sure, sure.
Um, At least Buzzcut. My favorite part of the track actually comes towards the end when they integrate the more R&B elements,
Mm-hmm.
and then the way it transitions into Chain On, which as a song I don't like so much, but I really like the production on that track
And Chain On.
on Chain On, yeah, and the
Yeah,
transition between Buzz Cut and Chain On is just it shows how the band balances these two different like the variety of sounds that they've captured, and I thought it was really well done.
see, I agree with Chain, and it's really all the work of this one small synth passage. It goes
Hmm. Yeah,
and it just goes through the song, and it just sounds so nice actually, and so catchy, and it
yeah.
really is the backbone of the track. I actually wrote a note on Chain On when I was listening to it, and it's also something that's going to come up later with Windows, which is the posse cut track of the album. But a Chain On is when I kind of thought about it. And I was thinking about the importance of like, no, I don't think anyone on this album is a particularly insane lyricist. Um,
Hmm.
there's no MF Dooms here, there's no Billy Woods or um,
Or Mother, to use a recent example.
sure, there's not like that real intricate rap schemes or anything. They really come alive with their production and their flow. And I was thinking on Chain On how important flow was, because the production on this track is very minimal. It's
Yeah.
kind of like it's got the same thing, and it's kind of got that head bobbing groove to it, and it goes throughout. And it's really the way that everything is being delivered and the flow that really emphasizes the track. Because lyrically, it's they're just kind of talking about stuff. It's nothing really there to grip onto. They're just
Well,
doing rapidy rap, but it's the
the
flow and the personality that I think that pops the track along with the production.
what do you make of the JPEG Mafia cover? Because what you're saying is right. The minimal production, though catchy, elevates or makes the flow and the lyrical performance a greater focal point. And so it was this track in particular in which a lot of these sort of cheesy pop culture references really stood out. I mean, JPEG Mafia, he cites Duolingo, Vine, Street Fighter, That's So Raven, and that's just the ones I've collected.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch more, etc. etc. It
Right.
goes on.
Um, and I think that's more of a subjective take on it. Like you're saying you don't like the references because it kind of feels like he's covering up lyrical ability or content ability. In terms of like his actual writing, um, in terms of how words are flowing into each other and how he's delivering the phrases, it's really well done, and he's definitely uh, talented in that regard. In terms of
Well,
content, it's kind of cheeky. And the way I took it is very cheeky. I enjoyed the "What's So Raven" reference because how often does that happen? And then I think I remember there being a game reference here. Oh, Supreme Kai. That's what the other one I enjoyed, referencing Dragon Ball Z of all things.
yeah.
And
Well,
it is like I didn't feel it was a bit of a cover up. I do get where you're coming from, because in terms of content, you're just kind of name dropping, right? And
yeah.
what does that mean? But it was cute. I don't know. There's a better way to use it than
No,
cute, but I
I
kind of enjoyed the tone of it.
I can appreciate what you're saying, but and that's what bothers me a little bit, because it sort of seems like it's a disingenuous way to connect with the audience without saying anything, just by name dropping.
Uh,
However,
the disingenuous it doesn't come off disingenuous to me because I know JPEG is that kind of person, right?
that's his whole shtick. Okay, yeah,
Right. So that he's into that kind of thing. He is kind of a nerd guy, and he has that kind of weird thing. His name is JPEG Mafia, right? Like
yeah.
he's got that whole aesthetic in general, that like Reddit new wave redditor kind of thing. And so I guess it doesn't bother me because I accept that as part of his package. Um, but I do get
Yeah.
where you're coming from, and I think that's a bit of a personal touch. Maybe you'd rather him speak a little more uh,
Well,
content wise.
Well, dude, listen to this line. This is one of the sickest lines, or one of the sickest rhymes in the whole album that I found, anyways. He says, "Used to get 50 views. Now they need Peggy's momentum. Let's check the addendum." He rhymes momentum with addendum. He's obviously got fucking talent.
Right.
But then he's saying things like, "Slick with the ink. These melodies need Duolingo." Shit. Like, what the what?
Right.
Like, there seems to be such a like a difference in quality, and he obviously has skill. And I just wish he would sort of go more towards his talent for putting together rhymes rather than, going for the more cheaper tactics. But like you said, it's sort of part of his aesthetic, which is not to say he's cheap. It's just his art, and but it for me is alienating. And
I actually think it's the opposite. I think well, depending on his references. If you're dropping references to things I didn't get or understand, I think I would be more alienated. But like, I know what That So Raven is. I grew up on that. I know Supreme Kai. I grew up on that. We're probably the similar age, me and JPEG. So like, we have similar like nostalgia.
Yeah, but
And
that's what I mean. Like, he just banks in. He just banks in on that rather than
sure,
rather than saying anything.
I think I get that. Yes, you're right. I'm not going to argue that. But I think the value of like the charm of it and the personality and kind of like uh, branding yourself as a JPEG Mafia and what it is that you are and what you kind of stand for and what pocket you exist in. I don't mind it at all. I don't think he, I'm not super into to JPEG Mafia's discography. I
Yeah,
know he got released the album there a year or two ago that was really well
he's got EP
received.
now, actually. EP2, 2021.
Um, so I can't really speak about his history, but I don't know if this is also uh, just something he was playing with for this verse, or if this is something he's more uh, uh, like reliant on. But I think I do remember him being that way. That he does this a lot, uh,
Yeah,
if I can recall,
and,
and I can see why you would be annoyed by it.
yeah, and I know Danny Brown and I know ASAP Rocky, but I've sort of turned my back a little bit on rap music in like the past half decade, and so there's been uh, a sort of almost new generation of rappers have emerged. JPEG Mafia, Brockhampton being another example that I'm not familiar with,
Hmm.
have no basis in. And I went back and tried to listen to some of JPEG Mafia stuff, but it's just
He's got a very obtuse production style that it makes him hard to get into, I think.
yeah, it's I don't know if it's for me.
It's been one that I've struggled to get into myself, but I every now and then I'll hear something I really like it, and it's just I haven't taken the chance to sit down and digest an album proper.
Yeah, and but I think let's speak a little bit to the features. I think the features on the record sort of drag away from Brockhampton. I really do. The ASAP Rocky and ASAP Ferg features also were. It just muddles up their sound. It sort of tries to take it in a direction that the guys then immediately redirect on the light, and then it becomes a far more focused project after that, I find.
Right, right. And honestly, the light is going to be a main theme throughout this album, and
Yeah.
it is so dominating in its performance, in its writing, and its content that this album, the whole album, in my opinion, should have been surrounded and built upon this track and this story. And
Well,
they do a half and half here, and I think
it
it's to its detriment.
it does. The thing is, after the light, the whole album, or not the whole album, but they return to this narrative, to this theme that occurs in the light. They return to it on the light, When I Ball, the light part two, and perhaps on other tracks that you've read more closely.
Dear,
But
dear
it does.
Lord,
Excuse me.
dear Lord as well. That goes into the light. I think that's also part of it.
Okay, yeah. But these first four tracks are completely removed from the idea and from
Right.
the the general theme. And so to me, it almost seems like they put together an EP of features, tacked it onto the front of the album for singles purposes. And they're obviously, these guys are super popular, and I think people would be like, yo, what the fuck, where are the bangers if they didn't include them?
Right.
But it's like there's a little tiny bit of a, not a little bit, is a quite obvious disconnect between this first half or first 4 tracks and then the rest of the record, which is outstanding, really.
Um, yeah, I think I can. I know. I think you're right, and I think you're also hitting on a part that, in my research, I found that this album is the end result of like a few different canceled sessions.
Uh-huh.
I think they started making one album, and then everything kind of changed midway through. It's kind of the sentiment that I've got.
The idea came halfway through the creative process.
Right, and I think that's what you're picking up on, and I think that those are lingering essences of that.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah. Okay.
when they did Technical Difficulties, which was these tracks they released kind of as a mixtape on their platforms and then removed them. Chain On was one of those, and a few of these other tracks here, I can't quite remember, were part of that. And they changed them around and repurposed them a little bit. I don't quite remember which ones were which at the moment. I think Bankroll and Chain On were two of those as well. So that kind of feeds into that idea for me as well, where I think there was a little bit of a Frankensteining with this album. All right, Light is the next track. Do you want to start us off and talk about the Light a little bit? Because I think this is the most important track on the album.
Well, the tracks like this track, it has, there's a sort of, it's telling a narrative, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the album becomes sort of very narrative driven with this song, and it occurs specifically again on When I Ball, Dear Lord, and the Light Part 2.
Right.
And it's essentially dramatizing a family situation of what seems to be like a broken home of, I'm not sure if it's a single mom with the where the dad died or.
Okay, well, let me give you a little bit back up here. This is a true story. Um,
Oh.
this is Joba. This is his story. This is his father who killed himself fairly recently. And
Mm-hmm.
he was going to, he kind of came in and said, I'm going to talk about this on this album. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people had expectations that there would be kind of a light brushing of it because of the content, but this song is not a light brushing of it. This is a very in-depth commentary, and it is taken very seriously and very dramatically. And there's also some backing tracks later on that seem to be like the band's attempt to uplift Joba in his kind of situation. They all moved into like the same apartment when it happened, to give them support and stuff. So this is like a big, I guess, emotional exercising on the Light for Joba and on this album. And I think that was the biggest source of uh, narrative structure or like creative fuel that I think is strong enough to motivate a whole album of songs and tracks and interplay. And I think they, like I said before, they do a little half and half. But when they do and they focus on this story and Joba specifically, I think it's the most strongest and compelling tracks on the album.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's yeah, the album definitely takes a more sentimental and not even necessarily sentimental, but melancholic tone. Like all of a sudden, the light comes on, and the tone of the album just becomes immediately more serious. And he opens the track start talking about his mother, and then he a lot of the narrative on these songs that deal with this theme, as much as it has to do with his father and the passing of his father, it also has to do with the relationship that he has with his mother and dealing with his mother's grieving process with her as a mother, him as her son, and the expectations that were placed on him, how everything has changed now,
Right, right.
and it's it's very compelling music.
It is, and he gets just graphic enough in part of this in his part of his verse to give you a punch in the stomach before he gets back and he just gets back into the groove. But there's a line in here where he just kind of describes something. I don't want to spoil it or anything for people listening, but it was a punch in the gut, and it really added like goosebumps to the listening process. So I think
Yeah.
that verse and Joba's verse on this track is probably the best verse on the album.
Can you point out just what the verse starts as, just for reference?
It's when he gets descriptive. Oh, Joba's verse is the when I look at myself, I see a broken man. Remnants of my pop put the Glock to his head. That's
Mm-hmm.
Joba, and that the beginning of that verse, right until the bridge starts, is what I'm referencing. Um, I'm trying to see specifically the line I'm talking about here now. Yes, yes, this is the line that comes after. I think I will always be haunted by the image, and then he paints you an image, and you can see why he'd be haunted by it.
Yeah, the track is very existential, and it goes into some graphic details, honestly.
Right, and it adds to the power. Honestly, it's hard to listen to this song without like really feeling for this guy. The bridge is also great here. This is one of those non auto tuned like kind of chorus bridge sections. For the record, I can fly around the world absorbing light, something missing deep inside the light. And that part he sings it really well. I think Joba's a great singer, and there's not a thick of autotune on it. It comes off great. Kevin Abstract comes in after that, and he kind of like, it's impossible to match the dramatic tension
Mm-hmm.
of the initial verse, but he talks about like um, the fact that he's gay and still the strained relationship that he has with his mother, and how I think he alludes to that she still doesn't know his name, and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting. Like they both take this time to kind of speak about some issues in their life, and obviously Joba's got this grand one, but it's not to undermine Kevin Abstract's own struggles being a gay man, a gay black man for that matter, in the rap game. And so it's a very like it's an interesting song, and it doesn't come off very like uh, somber in tone per se. Like there's still kind of like the production that kind of keeps an energy to it all, but it is lower end, and it does take time to really slow down and get into more uh, substantial content.
Yeah, it just seems more serious.
Right.
Yeah, I said melancholic earlier. I mean, the content of the lyrics are, but the tone of the song is, yeah, it's more serious. Not that it's not overly sentimental or anything,
Right.
but to say what you're saying about the guy who rapped the verse about his homosexuality, he's got a great line where he says, "I could take the hate and I could take the praise, and it's all noise to me. I'll turn into Satan." Almost like, like I'll endure whoever it is that you want me to be. I'm just gonna be myself.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. So that's the core track, and then it kind of moves away from that, and you get into the second half of the album. But you said you're kind of like your favorite. And I guess you were saying early in the week to me that you hated that you were listening to this album. But you've made that kind of turnaround since, and I believe it's the second half of this album that kind of helped you make that turn. Is that right?
Well, it would start with the light, but I used to get fatigued on the record because of the first four tracks, and so I would make it to the light, and then it would be a good track, and then the next track is the longest track on the album, almost 6 minutes, and so I would pause it then, and then just end up walking away from the album on a good note, having endured the first four tracks.
Right. Um, kind of shows a little bit of my listening process is a little interesting too, because I didn't always start from the beginning of this album when I listened to it. Sometimes I would start at Windows, and listen to the second half of the album. And sometimes that messed with the narrative structure, and like I didn't, the light didn't stand out to me right away because I didn't quite listen to it in order. But once I did eventually listen to it in order, but I find that too sometimes certain aspects or certain parts of the album are too fatiguing for me. So sometimes I'll have to start midway through and give a better digestion to some of the later tracks. And I think that was to this album's benefit when I did do that. I Windows was a track that I went in a few circles on in terms of how I felt about it. This is their posse cut, which is a common a rap trope. I don't know if you're familiar, but basically everyone in the group, comes in and does a verse in their cipher or whatever. And I think some are better than others is kind of where I ended on this one. And I think the chorus here was a little auto-tuned as well, if I remember correctly. I kind of was not a fan of So Gone, So Flexy. Besides the name is fine. I did think that that verse was maybe the weakest because it was very standard rap. It didn't really fit the kind of Brockhampton feel of the poppiness of it and the energy of it.
Is his the first verse?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about the features is that oftentimes they'll be the most vulgar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you say, like sort of the most conventional. But yeah, like he drops a lot of N-bombs and talking about thugs and slums and inner city life and
right, and it's just kind of like your standard kind of verse. I didn't really pop to me.
No.
But afterwards, after I had listened to it a few times and kind of come to that conclusion that it was really the later verses that I liked the most. I did appreciate this one a little bit better after listening to it from beginning to end, right? His verse is the only one on the album that kind of sounds like that. He's the only one with this kind of like standard kind of like flow and attitude, but that kind of it kind of feels like the exception to the rule on the album, and it adds to the variety and versatility of the sound of the album. And I kind of came around. I warmed on it after.
There's a verse at some point. I think it's just before the chorus, and I'm not sure who does it, but it's sort of keeps on saying "fuck you" all the time, and I didn't like that verse very much either. But I thought the flow of the other verses was really cool, and I thought it was one of the tracks where they balanced. Even though, again, the chorus work was perhaps for me the weakest part of the whole song, even compared to the verses that we were just bringing up that are a little bit problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was, like you said, I'm not sure what you say, it's called a posse track?
Yeah, kind of a posse track or like a cipher.
Yeah. Everyone gets to say their piece. I like that they did that, and I think it was like a good time to introduce. Like it almost feels like the album starts with the light, and like this seems like a good, almost second track to the album that orientates you with the band. And
yeah, I agree with you that the album feels like it starts at the light. I think the light really feels like the tonal lead of it all, and so this going after light I think really works as well. I agree with that.
You get to know all the characters of the band and their different flows. Yeah,
and they're kind of like their own little personal touches on certain things that they do. I enjoy like the Go Merlin, like the kind of feel to it all, and there's like this really good energy, and everyone's kind of stepping in and giving their verse, and it's just that's kind of the fun of the posse cut. I think I wasn't a huge fan of Matt Champion's verse. I liked Merlin Wood and Kevin Abstract. I became more fans of the so sexy one, or whatever the name is, So Flexy. But the one I thought was the strongest one, in my opinion, was Dom's, Dom McLennan. That his verse, which is the fourth verse, if you wanted to reference it, I thought was the was the most strongest of them all.
Okay, so that's the one after the, right?
Uh, yeah, after the
Might
chorus.
be a fortune teller or a ATM.
Yeah,
It's got engines of its own. I can't even pretend. Yeah.
yeah. That verse I thought was the strongest on the album. There's just a lot of like more production techniques that happen um, throughout this track. That kind of like it grows and they do something here that I've never seen Posse Cuts do all that much unless they do it. They either go all in with this kind of idea or they don't do it. But they change the beat and kind of the production for the very last verse, uh, if I remember correct. So Bareface's verse, I believe. He's kind of rapping over a little more lo-fi um, and kind of more interesting production that I actually really enjoyed on the latter half of Windows. And he's like the only one who really gets to like rap on top of it, and it's kind of like I kind of would like to hear some of the other guys over this. Like I thought it was more compelling than the initial beat that was on the track.
Yeah, I can remember that they shift to a like a lo-fi beat, and it's really good. But I think it was well done. Like I liked how they introduced it just at the end and gave it to the one guy to do the verse.
Right,
I think if
I kind of liked it, but like I still kind of like why was it done like this? Why is it changed for only one person? You know, it just felt weirdly structured. Not that I totally disliked it. I guess you were saying you didn't like the refrain, "fuck the world and all that inhabit it." Is that what you're referencing?
the one I was referring to was earlier, just before the chorus, sending a fuck you to it all. Goes on a little bit, and then he rhymes, and then he goes, "Fuck if I know, yeah, yeah, yeah." But just the way that verse opened.
Yeah, I think that's Met Champion, and who's really good, and he's strong on other tracks. But I think you're right. I think this is one of his more weaker verses. I wasn't a huge on this one as well.
Yeah, it seems like it was a little more like in the conventional rap pocket a little bit. But I mean, they've got what, 7 verses. I mean, they're not all going to be the
Right,
best.
that's why it's so long. And usually these kind of tracks are long if there's a bigger crew, or whatever. But I was gonna mention,
Like, especially coming off of the light, it's got a little bit of an aggressive tone to it,
right.
which I mean, I guess so. Considering the drama of the light, there's sort of a little bit of anger in this one. But you are right. They repeat "fuck the world" and all that inhabit it several times.
Right, and it's kind of over this really lo-fi kind of aesthetic, and it really kind of sounds kind of cool to me. I kind of like it actually, the way that it's like the production on it.
Yeah, the production. Yeah,
and how it kind of sounds. I think it comes off really compelling, and it comes off like a little bit like a like a lo-fi hip hop kind of track, and I enjoy those. Yeah, we were talking about a little bit. I'll take on you because the only reason I really wanted to talk about that one was I thought it was maybe the worst track on the album.
I'll take you on.
Yeah, I keep saying that, don't I? I'll take you. I'll take you on. I even wrote it down as "I'll take on you." That's interesting.
But
but it's just it's a bit too pop, a bit too R&B, too much autotune on this. Like there's some good techniques on the song, some good ideas and good like parts of it, but the core of the song, like the string of it, it was just a bit much and really kind of grating to me, and I kind of end up being a skip for me.
oh yeah, this is the most boy band song on the whole record.
Right.
It's, I was taking the piss out of the first couple of songs, but yeah, I'll take you on. Yeah, I'd probably go with Chain On or Bankroll before I'd have to listen to I'll Take You On again.
Yeah, I was. This is not one of the better tracks. There's like some good stuff on there. It's just too much crooning, and like trying to be singers where, and then they're not all great singers, and cover it up, they auto tune it a little bit too much, and it just feels like I get what you're trying to do. You're a pop rap, and you're trying to keep a certain energy and a certain idea, but you need to get a little bit better on these kind of tracks. I think it doesn't quite land for me.
When they go hard pop, it's yeah, like if they made a whole album that was like this, holy god, it would not be good.
Right. I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't be super into it. This is like when they get into this kind of stuff. I'm not super into it.
I think it's like sort of the burden that the band has inherited with the approach that they've taken, because they always have to be balancing, like I said, and then this time they sort of let the seesaw tip way over onto the pop side, and it gets a little out of control.
After that, was there a song particularly that stood out to you?
I did make a note about Old News, because Old News, they introduced some turntable elements,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was a cool throwback to 90s rap.
Okay. Okay.
And, how did they conclude that track also in an interesting way, Mensch?
Tell them keep your faith to the sky. Keep your faith to the sky. Tell them keep. That's the outro.
Yeah, they introduce a choir at the end of Old News. It's one of the tracks that actually encompasses the genres and different elements that the band works with the most. And it's only 3 minutes and 14 seconds, and not necessarily a standout track, but if you listen to it, it's got a lot to offer. It's sort of like it's like a dark horse on the album.
Yeah, I did kind of like skip over a little bit because I thought it sounded a little similar to the previous track, because they were going more in their tuneful pocket when in this part of the album, and I kind of took "I'll Take You On" as this kind of like throwback to Ginger and some of that more sentimental stuff, and then I kind of had in my head that the second half of the album was kind of falling back onto that.
Okay.
And so Old News kind of fits a little bit into that pocket. To me, it came off like a better "I'll Take You On," like a more whole and well done version of that song. Like I said, I could see it as like a dark horse. Like it probably suffered from positioning for me because it comes right on after that track, and it comes before "What's the Occasion," which in my opinion was the first of these later tracks in that tuneful pocket that I really did enjoy.
Okay, yeah. Fuck's sakes. Everything I just said was about "What's the Occasion."
Okay. Very good.
It has the turntable and the choir, and I really like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember Old News well enough. I was like, I remember it being like "I'll Take You On," but I was like, "What's the Occasion"
right.
was the next one I really liked.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, "I'll Take You On" and "Old News" are. You're right. They're both very similar. Shit. And then, "What's the Occasion?" Yeah, it has the turntable and the choir, and it's the track that I thought incorporates a lot of different, like it's R&B, it's gospely, it's a little poppy, it's rap oriented with the verses. It sort of has the whole Brockhampton package.
I wrote that it felt very American, and the reason I wrote that was because of the guitar that's kind of behind it. It feels kind of like electric, like the I forget his name now. Jimi Hendrix doing the "America the Beautiful" on his electric guitar, and it's kind of got similar kind of tones to it as it kind of fills out the back, and it felt very American. Is what came off to me.
It's got like Kanye used to use that similar. I'm not sure if it's an actual guitar or if it's something that they generate through a soundboard, but Kanye used to use a similar sound on some of his albums.
Right.
And I think that was like a bit of a Kanye influence.
And I even mentioned here as well that even the outro was very sweet and lovely, and the song popped a lot while I was listening to it. And it's really, like you said, the Black Horse, because it's the track that after Old News and "I'll Take You On" that brought me back in. Like during my more passive listens, while I'm walking around the house or I'm doing laundry or something, and I'm listening to those tracks, I kind of start tuning out a bit. this song, like halfway through, is bringing me back in. It grabbed my attention again, and brought me back into the second half of the album, and brought me back in for the last leg, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. And I really like how they end "What's the Occasion" with the chorus, and then "When I Ball." I think perhaps the one of the most sentimental tracks on the album. Maybe if you don't count "Dear Lord," it is the most sentimental track on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And "When I Ball," it has this sort of sentimental woman's voice in the background. It's like a harmony that they just introduce every 5 or 8 seconds, however many beats,
Mm-hmm.
and then the story. Again, it revisits this narrative that is communicated in the light,
Mm-hmm.
and focuses more on the relationship with the mother. And I don't know, maybe it stood out for me because I've been here during the pandemic and I haven't been able to see my folks for a long time
Right.
because
Right.
of that. And the whole familial relationship theme really stood out. And they also incorporate the violin and the piano, and it has a real smooth R&B medley that really struck a chord with me. And also it has one of my favorite lyrics on the whole album. The lyric goes, "I would be a fucking baller like those posters on a wall. A little stain could be the beauty of it all." It's like this coming of age story, this Bildungsroman that he tells throughout throughout the song.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful song.
One of the things with this track, and I think it kind of talks about the ranges of sound that you can achieve with autotune. Um, this track uses autotune, and especially on the chorus, and how it's delivered, but it's done a lot better, and it finds a much better pocket than some of the other autotune issues. And this is I would champion this as like the proper way or an interesting way to use autotune in a productive manner. And I would point people to this track. Where I complained about autotune earlier, it's not quite the technique itself that I have issue with. It's usually sometimes of how it's implemented and how it sounds on certain songs. And this track I noted for its very good usage of it, and it's very
Well, it's
well produced way.
it's just more subtle, whereas with the more obvious tracks, like the auto tune, just is so obvious,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gives it a very artificial and overproduced
It might be
feel.
better to say there's a voice pitching, which is a type of autotune. But the voice pitching is on that track. I think is mostly what I'm referring to, which they do a lot. Kevin Abstract does it a lot. There's times you'll hear some voice pitch stuff, and that's Kevin Abstract, and it sounds nothing like him because he's pitched his voice in such a weird way. I'm not usually a fan of voice pitching too, and sometimes that can be annoying to me. But if you hit in the right sweet spot, I think it does well, and I think on this track it does that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, the next song I just want to loosely go over because it returns to and is probably the best banger on the album. Is "Don't Shoot Up the Party,"
Mm-hmm.
which I just enjoy the chorus on this like so much. Just like it's such a morbid kind of sentiment. Uh, don't shoot up party, please. Don't shoot up party, and it kind of speaks to the kind of world that America exists in. But it's also done really well with the production techniques, and it's a banger, and it's so easy to listen to, and I'm head bobbing the whole time, and again, pedal to metal kind of track, but it's still like it's steeped in kind of like a commentary on gun violence and stuff that
Thanks.
definitely uh, makes it more appealing to me.
Yeah, and if it keeps in step with the tone of the anxiety and existential dread that really takes shape on the back end of the album, or from the light going forward. And these types of banger tracks, so to speak, are not to my taste, but this is certainly a good song. It's just I don't personally go for these types of songs because the production is just so erratic and it has really heavy beat. And I think honestly the most banger part of the song is the way they deliver the refrain. Don't shoot up the party, don't shoot up the party. The way they just like the whole collective sings it at the same time,
Right.
and yeah, it gives it a real party vibe. But yeah, it's a good balance between existential angst and dread and commentary of gun violence in the U.S. and still being able to sound fun if you're just sort of casually listening and
Right. Yep.
catching the vibe.
It still holds on to that kind of like pop rap aspect of it, but it it, it kind of has more personality and more layers to it.
Yeah.
I thought that was maybe the dark horse of the album, in my opinion. I thought "Don't Shoot the Party" kind of was hidden there at the end of the album before it really gets into "Dear Lord" and the light part too. Um, I just wanted to highlight it a little bit.
Don't you think they could use this as a single though, because of the
That "Don't Shoot Up Party."
just the tempo?
Oh,
Mood of the song?
absolutely, absolutely. I think "Don't Shoot Up the Party" could absolutely work as a single for this album, 100%.
Like if we were gonna cut the first four songs, like we were talking about earlier, and just say the album begins with the light onwards, I would pick "Don't Shoot Up the Party" as like the single of
Yeah,
the album.
yeah. In terms of the latter half of the album, that's the single that's located there, in my opinion. But like, I don't see a lot of attention. I didn't see it as a single.
No,
Maybe it is.
no, you're right. It's the first few songs on the album all have like 7 million views, blah blah blah, on Spotify, anyways. And then this song is, still sitting pretty at 2.4 mil, but
It's not getting the attention as the other one. No, I agree. Um,
yeah, it's not as popular.
it's the and then it's the outro of this album, which is maybe is super strong, and it starts with "Dear Lord," which is a gospel piece, very short. Um, and it's sung by Bareface, and it's like this interlude almost into the final track by Joba. But this song is like dedicated to him, I think, in terms of like Brockhampton's song to him as a member. As it just starts with like, "Dear Lord, Lord, will you come down and help out my brother? You know, he needs you more," and stuff like that. Yeah, I want you to let him know that he's still loved. And it's just like this very nice and sentimental message that they're sending to him before he gets into his final track, and it's like this interlude gospel track, and I think it's a very beautiful moment on the album.
Yeah, it's really well placed. And when I first heard it, I thought it was a response to "Don't Shoot Up the Party." But
Oh,
then when I assimilated the album more and listened to it more, I realized that it fit in with the sort of grander narrative of the album that we've been talking about.
right, absolutely. And then it goes into that final track where he does the light part two, and Joba continues to, you know, pour his heart out. Kevin Abstract comes in and does the same thing, and they just, they end the album off strong.
Yeah, it's a really poignant note to end the album on, and I think it summarizes the whole mood and the whole mood of the album.
Right, like Joba
What
start.
it, what,
Go ahead.
I said it summarizes their whole artistic vision for the album,
Right,
and it was a really poignant note to end on.
right. Even like Joba's second verse here, he starts with, "When the hammer pulled back, did you think of me?" You know, and it's just like these thoughts and stuff that are super personal. That I have to commend him for putting out there to the public. You know, for people to listen and for like people like me and you to dissect it and pull it apart these emotional, potent moments and thoughts in his life that he's really putting out there. And I have to commend him for stuff like that. It's a difficult thing to be doing, especially with the subject matter.
Yes, yeah, it's almost like a piece of confessional poetry or writing. It's very brave of him to do.
Right, right. And and I kind of don't want to spoil the song too much or overly discuss it because I think this is one of those songs in terms of content and lyrics on this album that I think it's better for the listener to go and experience it themselves and really kind of like digest the kind of things he's talking about and where he's coming from and how it's performed. This album in general, I think, really is stronger because of those parts, and those parts are very soaring and high and very compelling. But there are some low points and some trims and cuts that could be made, and some lack of focus in other parts. But when it's high, it's high.
Yeah, when the vision is focused, then the album is, like you said, is soaring on all kinds of highs. It's reaching towards 9 and 10 status. But as an album, is a little bit messy.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the byproduct of having so many members. You know, um, it,
Well, I think it's just the features is really what messed it all up.
yeah, I can see that in some of the tracks. I just really think that some repositioning of tracks and cutting of some other tracks and more tracks towards the thematic topic would help a bit. I don't particularly blame too many of the features, but I can see what you're saying. What you were saying, like it kind of feels like they were shaping songs to fit the feature a bit and kind of took away from their style. That's right. I wish they kind of brought the features into their style a bit more. Um, Sometimes some people can struggle with that, but I think that would have benefited more on this album, and maybe the way that features were incorporated.
Yeah, well, the features are one thing. I guess really what I was saying is that the tracks that have the most popular features, Buzzcut, Chain On, and Bankroll, have absolutely nothing to do with the artistic vision that is then later realized on the record. And
No,
so there's this weird disconnect. Like there's nothing linking the first four tracks together with the rest of the album, which seems to be far more coherent
right.
in what it wants to do.
Kind of reminds me of that Charm record where we comment how they incorporated Bon Iver and Soof Jam, but they kind of felt like the weakest parts because it was outside the vision, right? And I feel
Yeah.
like maybe Buzzcut and Bankroll and Chain On are a little bit in that pocket because they seem to be more like tracks to kind of fit the mold of being on the radio and played in playlists, and they will be, and they'll see a lot of success for that. But I think it kind of messes a little bit with the structure of an album as whole.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound too much like a Marxist, but essentially those are the tracks that are going to fund the album, so then that they can actually go ahead and do their art, which doesn't start until the light, and then that's when the album becomes great.
Right.
But they had to finance the album by churning out a couple of popular bangers that'll be appealing to the general public.
So, what do you think is the toe-in song for this album?
Toe-in song, "Don't Shoot Up the Party" or "The Light" for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with both those. 100%. I think I'd agree with both those.
It's pretty
the
obvious.
the light is such a centerpiece of the album that I really think everyone should listen to that, and then from there, it would understand the album a bit when they go into the full encompassing parts of it. So I would lean towards the light just because I think thematically as well, and it being like maybe the strongest track. But Shoot Up the Party also it kind of shows the diversity and variety that is also present on the album.
Yeah, and it's a fun track. Like you could put it on a party playlist, whatever, or listen to it in the car with your friends.
Right.
And yeah, like it's something you can listen to with people. Whereas the other tracks are maybe not something that is something more personal. But I would honestly encourage people just to skip the first four tracks altogether and start. The album doesn't really begin until the light. If I would have listened to the light first, then I would have fell in love with the album far sooner than what I did. But I had to endure the convention, the averageness of the first four tracks. Even though they still have their perks too that we mentioned, but
Right. They're not like dead tracks, terrible or anything. Just kind of weirdly. It's not like weirdly because I understand why they're there and what their purpose are, and I do enjoy Buzzcut. Um, but in terms of like the feeling of the album, it just they do feel a little misplaced and a little like a redhead stepchild.
it's just like a EP tacked onto the front of the album. And yeah, like we said, they're fun production cuts, and for me personally, I find some of the lyrics to be egregious. But yeah,
Sure. I think I'm walking away from this album with in the seven range, in the seven and a half range of kind of feeling like this, just because of some of the messiness of it, not all of it coming together, and a little bit of mismatch of the structure of the album is kind of where a lot of this is coming from. There's like one or two songs on here that I didn't really feel for, as I mentioned. Um, the opening like EP thing. Um, I do kind of agree with you, but I don't dislike the tracks particularly, like Chain On and Buzzcut. I do enjoy them, and I wouldn't really skip those tracks. Like I still enjoy them to a degree. The only tracks I think I'd skip are right there after I'll Take You On, and Old News was kind of like skip for me, and Can't On Me was a bit of skip. So that's where my negatives are coming from. But the strengths of The Light, Windows, What's the Occasion, When I Ball, Don't Shoot Up the Party, Dear Lord, The Light Part 2, all those being phenomenal tracks that work really well together and kind of are the core of the album, really raise it up, even though there is like little chunks of the album that I could go without. It ends up being like the 7.5 ish area for me.
yeah, super strong 7.
Right, right. Absolutely.
So this album's 46 minutes long. And the thing is, if you cut the first 4 tracks, you're still going to have a full LP. So,
yeah.
if they would have just cut those first 4 tracks, this album would be a solid 8 for me.
Mm-hmm.
But because they tacked on those first 4 songs, which, while having some appealing production elements, are quite middling, and are, if we're considering the record in the context of the concept of the album, have nothing to do with the artistic vision that the band eventually goes on to articulate, then yeah, the album is going to be in the 7 range because of the disconnection. It just really bothers me as far as the idea of the album goes.
Right. They're just if I'd like to give the album a better score. Like there's a better album here. Like there's like an 8 or a 9 in this album, but some of the choices really kind of muddies the vision up.
It's such a solid 7, though. Like
Yeah.
it's such a solid 7. I just wish they would have released the other tracks as EPs. Those first 4 tracks as EPs. Then you're talking 8 and 9.
Right. I agree with you. All right. Well, we will meet you all again next week. Is there anything else that you wanted to add here today, Zach?
Not about this record, but do you have your eyes on anything coming down the chute?
Do I have my eyes on anything? I've been a little busy.
Yeah, yeah.
So my eyes have been kind of pulled away. I'm not sure. There could be something that takes me by surprise. Let me have a quick look. I thought there might have been a album I had in mind. There was a Jeff Rosenstock Ska Dream, which is kind of like a spin on the this is last No Dream album that really piqued my interest. I don't know if it's worth covering in full here, but it seemed cute, and it's something that would interest me. I know Kanye just came out with the album, but 2 back-to-back rap releases, and I know you're not a huge gangster rap guy, so probably won't going to cover that one. But in terms of what's coming down the line, I'm not actually, because like I said, I've been a little bit busy doing it with stuff in my life that I haven't really had a chance to have my finger on the pulse there. But I know last month there was a bunch of tracks that I had singled out for future releases that I was really enjoying that I'm not quite sure when they're releasing. But if any of those come out in the next little while, that'd be phenomenal as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm looking just now at the release radar, and there are some interesting picks. I don't know if some of them are full LPs or if they're just EPs, which I find is a little bit of a problem in today's current music landscape. It seems like we're getting more EPs than we ever have.
Right, right. Yeah,
Like
there's
when we were
there's a
kids,
lot.
I remember being so many EPs.
I don't mind EVs either because I kind of think they're in a great length of time. I enjoy how short they are. I think they kind of get in and get out a lot of times. So sometimes I enjoy EPs more than I enjoy LPs, but it kind of depends.
Do you think, and I can see what you mean, they can certainly be fun, but do you think they're a bit of a testament to our shrinking attention spans?
Yeah, that's also a tribute to the absolute oversaturation of the market.
Yeah.
Everyone can release music, and there's just so much music out there that the game has kind of become more about content and getting releasing than it is about holistic pieces. So I think it's more about there's so many things for you to do on your phone or on your computer that there's so many ways to get pulled that I think it speaks more to that kind of ADD-ness of everything.
And then when I seen Brockhampton, a band that I had never looked into but had knew of, and seen that in the past 5 years they've released more music than some bands have in their entire discography.
Oh,
I said, "Oh,
I meant
this is one of those bands that are releasing music, just putting whatever on a record, and people are listening to it."
there's actually a point I meant to bring up that I had, and I'm remembering here at the end. Apparently, according to Kevin Abstract, they are releasing another album this year.
Okay.
And it's going to be their last album.
Their last album? Why are they ending the collect?
I have no idea. I only kind of read a little bit of it in passing, and you maybe take it as a grain of salt. But this is the first part of two that will be their farewell, I guess, before they go on and do their own things, I guess. So maybe we'll touch back in on part two, if it all turns out that way, and see how everything went.
Yeah, that's right. And Brandon, just a warning, there are some pretty cool metal releases. So just be prepared.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I'll get a little better each time I listen to them. Maybe I'll enjoy them a little bit more. But for every metal, there's going to be a rap album. But for every rap album, there's going to be a metal album, I think. So that's our dueling suggestions are going at this point.
Yeah, our sensibilities are a little bit different, but want to know something? It's been fun, because this was a pretty eye-opening experience for me, and this is an important record that we listened to.
Right.
It's an important record they put out.
I'm glad that you kind of came around because you were saying that you didn't like it early in the week. Obviously, you mentioned for the first 4 tracks, and I was like, all right, I kind of like the album. We'll see. Let's see what he complains. But I expected a lot of comments on the lyrics to be coming up about, certain the gang violence stuff and that kind of stuff that you don't enjoy. But then, I was listening to Light and stuff, and I was like, well, this isn't the kind of lyrics that he would have an issue with. So I'm curious why he didn't like this. But as I see, that's not the case.
Yeah.
But
well, it was just it took a while to get through the record. Like when you listen to that People Place, it took you a while to get into it, right?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
To find my place within it.
Yeah, yeah.
So some of these albums really do take a week to really marinate, for on our listenings.
Yeah.
And so honestly, if we did these reviews on our first listens, I think there'd be a lot lower scores to go around. Sometimes music it grows on you.
Yeah, and it would be an injustice to the effort that the band put in and it wouldn't be an accurate rating, I don't think.
Right, I agree with you.
Yeah, and but yeah, it's been fun to sort of bounce our different aesthetic tastes and sensibilities back and forth because it's been very sort of eye opening, but like we've just been saying, also challenging, and that's fun. That's what music should be all about.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I enjoy when that metal albums come up because I do my best to try and find within it parts that I do like, but even through some of my more egregious issues with it. But I think most of my issues with metal comes from not having history with it, and usually some of the more qualities that will emerge in bad metal, and then obviously good metal kind of alleviates a lot of that. So that's kind of where I
Yeah,
gotta find.
yeah, it's certainly a genre where you've there's a lot of crap out there, but as far as when I said I wasn't enjoying the album to you earlier in the week, I didn't want to specify what exactly it was that
Right,
was bothering me.
right.
But the message I sent you specifically was, "I hate you for making me listen to this music." I had no chill about it. I was having such a hard these first four songs.
Right, right. But like I said, I'm glad that you came around the other side of the bend and found some peace within it.
Yeah, no, it was good.
I enjoyed this album too. It's a little less than I wanted it to be, but I also was blown away with some other parts of it, so I can't be too complaining. It's 7 strong. I would recommend the album to people to listen to, especially Brockhampton fans. I'm sure you've already listened to it, but leave some comments and subscribe and follow. It all helps, and send us an email. I don't know. Let us know how you think.